All right.
All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Enterprise Agility Champs. We are excited to have our first presentation of the year. Happy New Year and welcome to EAC. We have an amazing speaker, Jim York, here with us today. And I want to say that Jim York is one of my early mentors. When was that? 2008, 9, I think,
Oh,
Jim,
oh,
when we met.
you're
Yeah.
probably so, probably about that time.
And we've been in touch ever since, and so much to learn from him throughout this journey. And I'm super excited. There could be no one better than Jim to present on a topic that he is so passionate about. He's going to talk about transformation, and he's also going to talk about learning loops. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Jim to ESC. Uh, Over to you, Jim.
All right, thanks, Toby. No, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. Happy New Year to everyone. So, when we think about a new year, it's we have the New Year's resolutions and things that we make. The ideas of how we're going to make ourselves better, and sometimes those don't work out as well, or we don't stick with the plan as much as we might. I want to talk this evening with you about the changes that we want to make, and specifically changes for productive action around creating products that delight customers, and the teams that do that, and the organizations that support them, and looking at that initial idea of what we think might be the right direction to go in, or perhaps the right way of going in that direction, or perhaps even the people who are along for the journey. Having the ability to make those plans, kind of envision the future, and then start a journey along the way to that future. And if we're not making the progress, or perhaps we're making progress, but we're suddenly discovering as we get closer to the goal, it's not as attractive as we thought it might have been. That ability to pivot and make an adaptation or adjustment, and that's really what this evening's talk is about. Those of you who know me, probably know me as a coach, a team coach, and a teacher. I tend to work in a very informal manner in these types of sessions. So I invite you, if you would like to, unmute, keep your video on, ask questions as we go. We'll all get bored if it's just me up here. So please do engage and ask questions as we go. I also don't work with slides. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to do some screen sharing, and I'll be doing some drawing. Again, those that know me, that's kind of my style. When I'm in person, I typically have a flip chart marker in my hand, or a whiteboard marker. But now you're going to have to deal with me with my iPad and my Apple Pencil. So again, I invite you to ask questions as we go. We've got, maybe about 40 minutes, and leaving a little buffer there at the end. And so what I'd like to introduce two topics, or related topics. One is double loop learning, and the other is a construct based off of that and connected to Agile, and that's just learning loops. And so I want to start with the double loop learning. So I need to share my screen to do that. So just please bear with me while I perform a little magic here in the background. And Zoom's doing its little mischief here of hiding your faces behind my shared screen. So I just need to do a little adjustment here and get you all back where I can see you. And Toby, I think we have 4 people in the waiting room. So I don't know if I'm going to let them in or no.
They probably had the link problem. That's probably why they're there.
There we go. I was just going to pause and let them arrive. Welcome those of you who are just getting started. They just arrived, and we are just getting started. This this is my iPad that you're seeing right now. And so what I want to do is just draw a simple systems diagram. And this is based on a concept that was, I guess, observed by Chris Argyris in the 1970s. And he kind of formalized it as double loop learning. You know, in hindsight, this might look really obvious, but you know, when you're kind of looking at it from the other side where you haven't actually created the diagram yet, it may not be quite as obvious. So what Chris Argyris was looking at was basically doing a job. And so how do we get something done? And very basically, he comes up with this thing of we start with an idea. We have an idea of something that we might like to do. So that's my kind of grossly drawn light bulb. That's representing an idea. And so the idea will then inform inputs to a process. And those inputs will then be processed. So this is the most simple systems diagram you could possibly create. And then on the outside of this, we get the output. So very, very simple systems diagram, input, process, output. So we're talking about double loop learning. So there must be a single loop. And that happens right here. So the single loop is verifying that we got the output that we were seeking. So when we go into crafting the input, we set certain expectations on what it is that process will result in. And then we have tests that we put in place and run to see whether or not that output was in fact created and satisfies the tests. If we aren't successful in passing the tests, then we go back and we try again. And so that's hence this is the single loop. So we try again, same specification, try the process again. An example of this, very simple example, is let's imagine that a customer, since I have a light bulb there, I'm just going to use this as the example. The customer says, I would like to have a light source that I can turn on and off. So that's our input, is that we want basically an on-off mechanism for a light source. So we try to create this on-off light switch, for example, and maybe we have a design and we try it the first time and we build that out and we try the test and we flip the switch to the on position and nothing happens. So it failed. So we take that feedback and go back to our input, same specification, create the on-off light switch. The test is very simple. Flip the light switch on, light turns on, flip the light switch off, light turns off. So we try it a second time. Second time, maybe it succeeds, and we flip the light switch on, light comes on, flip the light switch off, light goes off. At that point, we can exit the single loop and enter the double loop. So with the double loop, we ask the customer, the requester, what do they think about this? So we show them the functioning light switch and we say, look what happens. And we flip the light switch on and the customer screams and says, that's too bright. And we're like thinking, bright? What does brightness, the intensity of the light, have anything to do with this job? And it doesn't have anything to do with the job. It doesn't have anything at all. It wasn't what we were asked to do. We weren't asked to provide a light source with a particular light intensity. We were simply asked to create an on-off light switch. So at this point, it's not a blame game of arguing with the customer like, well, you should have told us. The problem is that the customer hadn't had the light on before to be able to know that the intensity of the light wasn't going to be appropriate for their particular situation. It's only through the creation of the light switch and the turning on of the light that the customer then discovers. It's revealed to all of us that there's something else that's desired in addition to this on-off capability. So we take that feedback from the customer and change our idea, our assumptions around what it is that the customer actually needs. This is the magic of the double loop. It challenges our assumptions. And we can use the results of the single loop to generate new insight that then feeds back into the creation of new assumptions about what is going on. So once the customer has the tangible thing in their hands, or their ability to experience it, they can react to it. And that's key. Those of you that use the Scrum framework in your work processes with your team will know the importance of having an increment. That increment is the real working, tangible thing that the Scrum team creates, at least one of, every sprint. And in our reviews, we have a formal inspection of that item. It's not the only opportunity to inspect the item, obviously. You could obviously look at it earlier in the sprint if you wanted to. But the sprint review is that formal event where we bring stakeholders together and show them the working light switch. And the expectation is that we will learn something from that event. We will learn that either we've satisfied the customer's need, or we will learn that there's something more. And that information, if we're using the Scrum framework, gets fed back into our product backlog, which is where we collect all of these ideas about what it is that we believe the customer needs, the things that would be important or valuable to them. And then, of course, we come back through, if we're using Scrum, we come back into the next sprint planning meeting, and we plan out the next increment of what it is we're going to do for the customer, or the next iteration of what we're going to do for the customer. So this is the concept of double loop learning. The expectation is, when we're in an environment where there are unknowns, that we're not going to just go through the single loop and be done. The expectation is we will discover something by going through that process as a single loop, and then revealing that to the requester and other stakeholders. And we'll use that feedback from that experience to improve our ideas and get a better fit for what the customer actually needs. So this is double loop learning. The teams that we're working with in our transformations in our organizations, they constantly go through these learning loops, the single and the double learning loop. And as a coach, I found that we go through these loops in different dimensions, in different areas within the context of what it is that we're doing as teams within the organization. So this is what I call just learning loops. So we need a pen for this. And let me change my pen color here. I'm going to do green for this. All right, here we go. So bear with me on this. I need to draw a circle. There we go. So this first circle is going to be the product learning loop. So I'm just going to label that here. So again, keeping the double loop learning in mind, this is just like the light switch example that I gave. It's like, okay, well, I want to on-off light switch. So we go through the process of building it, and we discover there's more to it. There's a light intensity issue, maybe a light temperature issue. Maybe there's the color of the light. There's all these different characteristics of the light that might factor into ultimately what the customer is going to need for their particular situation where they need light. So we're going to go through this learning loop around the product. And again, double loop learning is applying, it's kind of implied here within this product loop. At the same time, we are coming up with ideas as a team on how we're going to build that product. So we have a different loop. I'm just going to do this one in, let's do red. And this is the process loop. Go back. I'm going to move that just a little bit over here. All right. So this is the, let me do a little red line here. This is going to be the process loop. So again, in the example I just gave of doing the light switch, the first design didn't work, and the way that we built that didn't work. So we had to evolve our design and try again. So this is actually happening within the single loop. When we are working together as a team in our organizations, the next sprint, if we're going to use Scrum for example, the next sprint, we typically aren't just building another light switch following the same specification. We're now going to do something new. So for example, let's imagine that we learn through the interactions with the stakeholders and with the requester that they need a different intensity of light for different things that they want to do in the space where the light is. So we land on the idea of creating a dimmer switch for them. So that gets fed back into our product backlog. It gets prioritized, potentially comes into the next sprint. The processes that we use to create the simple on-off light switch may not suffice for building a dimmer switch. So we will have to learn and evolve our processes to be able to create that new thing. So our processes are continuing to evolve, and this is happening with every new thing that we take on as a team. Every new, again, if we're using Scrum, every new product backlog item that comes into a sprint may need some revision to our existing process in order for it to be the process that will successfully enable us to create the output that's been specified. We also are going to have potentially a need for different people with different knowledge and different skills. So let me just put them down in blue. So the people dimension here, we're also going to go through this. So since everything that's coming in, when we go from the completion of one output to what is it that we're going to do next, that definition of what we're going to do next is something that's new. Not only will we have to potentially evolve our processes, we may also have to get a different group of people. Now, generally, we try to keep the same group of people together through time. Generally, we try to do that. However, what dictates whether that's going to work or not is what is at the top of the product backlog. If what comes into your team in a sprint planning meeting, for example, requires some specific skills or knowledge or experience or expertise that your current team does not have, they need to evolve to become the team they need to be, so that the team itself, the people, are not the impediment to the creation of value. So this may mean that team members go to training. It could be that team members hire someone to mentor them, or whatever mechanism exists within the organization for that mentor to be hired. It could be that the team is augmented by having new people join them. That new person may join them, depending upon what's needed, for an hour for the entire sprint. If that's all that's needed, we would just get them as part-time for an hour just to clear that thing that would be blocking the team. Sometimes it's a shift, and this is something that's going to be required on an ongoing basis, and it might be required part-time or full-time, whatever it is. The people are going to evolve as well. So imagine kind of the extreme example of this is your greenfield on some sort of initiative, and what you're working on requires a lot of creativity. And in order to get those things created, you're going to have people who are creative and have that kind of passion and those kind of skills to do that kind of work. Fast forward to 5 years later, the product may enter a very stable state where it's more maintenance and operations. those same people who were there in the beginning when the skills that were required were more creative, they're probably bored at that point, and they most likely have already left, seeking other opportunities that get them excited. What you have now in the backlog are things that are routine, 9 to 5 type of activities. And some people love that kind of work. And those are the kinds of people that we want to have on the team at that time, or the people that enjoy that kind of work. The other thing with the people dimension is that every time we go to do something, the requester that we're dealing with at that point in time might be someone new. It might be somebody that we haven't built something for before. And so if we're going to build something for them that's going to fit their need, we need most likely to engage in some conversations with that individual. If we've never talked to them before, never met them before, then there's a possibility we might have to learn how that person communicates, how they prefer to work. So there's going to be a human dimension of how do we work with each other. And that might have to be developed from scratch if it's somebody that's new. So again, the things at the top of the backlog are what are going to tell us what we need in terms of process and people. And of course, centric to all of this is the customer. And the customer, I'm just going to draw them here like this. The customer has some need. And initially, when we are trying to figure out what the customer's need is, that is also subject to assumptions and biases and opinions. So we might even have some differences of opinion as to who our actual customer is. I can remember many Agile initiatives that I helped launch where the main hurdle we needed to get over before we could get started on building the product was shared agreement on who the customer was. Who is our target customer? So that may be in question. The customer typically has a job to be done, and the product integrates into that job to be done in some way. Typically, the product doesn't do the whole job to be done for the customer. It's just a piece of a larger process or workflow that customer is engaged in order to do their job. So the question is, well, there are many, layered onion. It's who's the customer? What's their need or job to be done? What is our product? And how does our product contribute and add value to that job to be done? What is the most important thing that we could possibly be doing for our product right now? That's what we're going to do first. And then what process is going to be required to create that, and what people do we need? And so we have another loop going on here in the middle around that customer need, because sometimes customers don't know what they need. They've got an idea of what they think they need, but since we haven't any validation yet, because we haven't built it yet, we're going to have to go through the double loop. And based on the customer's assumptions of what their job to be done is and what their need is associated with that, and what our product is and process, people, et cetera, we're going to be testing again every time we build something. Is this making things better for that customer? So I've got a template that I've created for this, and I want to share that with you. So I'd like to play around with this idea. And again, if there are questions that we're going through, please do ask. I'm going to stop that share, and I'm going to share another screen with you.
Jim, there was one comment about politics as part of what you were just drawing.
Oh, the politics.
Can you address politics as part of this?
Oh, well, okay. So politics is going to go into what is called triple loop learning. And that wasn't intended to be a topic this evening, but since it's been brought up, I'm so excited. So yes, absolutely. Politics falls into the third circle. That is, or the third learning loop. And I look at that as being embedded into these three loops. It's there everywhere. You know, it's there with the customer and what their need is. It's there with the product, it's with the process, the people. I see it just so tightly integrated with all of this. It's inescapable. It's just it's part of like the air we breathe. It can be useful from a modeling perspective, however, to place these three circles into a larger circle, just a big circle that surrounds everything, and have that be the triple loop learning. And that is learning about things like politics. And that also factors into what people's beliefs are. And it also factors into kind of their way of being, what they think meaning is. And for those of you that are coaches, this is kind of like the sweet spot. This is learning about learning. This is really where your Scrum Master and some, not all, Agile coaches should be engaged. Unfortunately, most Scrum Masters that I've encountered through the years, and most Agile coaches that I've encountered as well, aren't engaged in that third circle. We're often heads down, working with the nuts and bolts of what we think the teams need, without realizing that the team is actually larger. It includes all those people that are on the periphery that are part of that culture and the politics and the like. So and I don't want to bash Scrum Masters at all here, because it's not their fault. It's not their fault. At least not completely their fault. I don't think we expect enough of our Scrum Masters in engaging in that larger dimension into the political arena, et cetera. I don't think we expect them to do that in most organizations. So I think that part of the challenges that Scrum Masters have in engaging there is that the organization doesn't create the space for them to do that, does not set those expectations. And in other cases, maybe it is something that the Scrum Master could actually deal with, and that may be learning more about what the Scrum Master actually is, rather than letting someone else set the expectations for what that role is within the organization. And then they can start chipping away at the constraints that organizations have placed on them. Yeah, so I see Jason, C-suites won't listen to a lowly Scrum Master. Well, an effective Scrum Master should have a direct line to the C-suite. Unfortunately, organizations aren't, as you say, they're not going to, they're typically not going to, either provide that access or the ear. I agree with you. Absolutely. Absolutely. That doesn't, however, let the Scrum Master off the hook. They have to keep chipping away at that. And I had somebody the other day come to me and say, I'm the lucky 13. There was a fellow coach, and he told me I'm the lucky 13. I said, what do you mean? What is a lucky 13? Because I'm the 13th coach to work with this team. And I said, well, what's that all about? And he said they think I'm brilliant. And I was like, really? And he goes, yeah, I'm not teaching them anything different or coaching them in any different way than any of the 12 coaches that came before me. But they're at the right place and the right time, and they are getting it. And he says, so I'm the lucky 13, everything that I'm doing is working well for the team. And so I kind of took away two things from that. One is, if you're the 13th coach and everything's going swimmingly, don't give yourself too much credit for that. And the second thing is, which is more likely the case, you're one of those initial 12 coaches, and so don't feel too bad. And basically, the success that you have as one of those initial 12 is you're laying the runway. You're preparing the team for the time when that 13th coach arrives and things finally click. Yeah. So thanks for the question around that. So other questions here. Yeah, we've got no slides. Where is it published? What is it that's being asked about? Oh, this is
I already answered. So
Yep.
there was a question about videos, and I sent the link.
Yeah, excellent. All right, let me share the other thing here, because we have a limited amount of time to play around with this. So let me share the other thing. I'm gonna get you over to a mural. So I'll go ahead and put in the chat window here the link. So let me see here. Just need to copy and paste it. Here we go. And I'll see if I can share that. Here it is. All right, it's been behind another window. There it is. Okay. Oh, got to refresh. All right. There we go. Oh, look, a bunch of people popped out here and joined me. So this is a simple exercise that you can do with your teams. This can be done literally at any time. It doesn't have to be done in conjunction with a retrospective or it can be, but this is actually something that I found very useful in doing during a kickoff. So when you're launching your team, into their first, sprint, if you're doing Scrum, is to ask what are the things that we need to know? What are the things we need to learn? What are the things that are subject to discovery? And so you'll see the same, the same learning loops here that we saw earlier: product, process, people, and customer need. And I've got it color coded with these index cards, these little sticky notes over here on the side. And typically what we do, one of two things: if there's a whole lot of stuff that needs to be learned, typically I will just have another area of the board where people will have maybe 4 columns where they'll place the sticky cards. But if you got a smaller group, you might just try actually putting them over on the board. So, for example, this green card over here for learning about product, you could put in something, related to the, something you need to learn about the product. So you might start off with, if you're doing Scrum, you might have something as simple as, what is our product goal? That's where we're supposed to get started. There might be some disagreement on that, and that needs to be resolved. So again, this would be something that might be brought up during a kickoff. What do we need to know about people? Might be, how are we going to get those audit folks joining us to complete audit work each I'm misspelling each sprint. So if your audit team or audit group within the organization is not part of your core team, and you are basically having them as being part-timers, can you get them to engage every sprint, or are you going to have to wait until just before release to get them to do their audit, which of course creates all sorts of risk. There we go. Please do join me out here. Add things in here. Why does the customer need it? Excellent question. Boy, how often do your developers work in the dark about what the customer's actually doing and why they need to do that? Yeah, why does the customer need it? So what about going to another level on that is for a discrete thing that the team is working on, a discrete feature. How about, who is the customer for this feature? Does that ever happen to folks? I've got a question about what's actually going on here from the customer's perspective. Who do I talk to? So feel free to add things from your actual teams, things that are going on with them right now.
Jim, there's a question about the best way for the Scrum Master to have access to the C-suite, and I also see a yellow card there that kind of gets to the same question.
Yeah, no, I see it. So best way to have access. Oh gosh. You know, great Scrum Masters, what I consider to be effective Scrum Masters, are almost always on the edge of being fired. So how do you get access to the C-suite? You explore all the possible channels to get in that door, but you have to be very, very careful, because I think it was Ken Schwaber that had the expression, "A dead Scrum Master is useless." You don't want to push too hard and then find that you're no longer the Scrum Master. You basically get fired. But you're always pushing the edge. And I'm not thinking that you're going to get in that door today or tomorrow or next week or even next month, or perhaps even not next year. But with enough concerted effort, ultimately, it may be possible that we can start opening some of these communications channels. You know, I might be looking at it as a Scrum Master. I might be looking at, who does the CEO actually talk to? You know, who do they know? Who do they trust? And then start networking out from that to see, you know, how we can build some connections, and then work those connections to get the messages up, and ideally to the point where somebody invites you to join them in a conversation with the CEO, and they can provide the entree. But that's something that takes time, and it may never happen. You might have to wait, you know, until, you know, that 13th coach arrives. Doesn't mean that you don't stop trying. So I'm looking to see what else people are adding here. Oh, how do we know if our process is working or effective? Excellent question. Do we know what the product life cycle is? That's an interesting one. Yeah, has anybody worked on a product where it was basically, once you build it, it gets used, and then it's basically used up and never needed again? A lot of times the product life cycle is this thing that is it's could be never ending. Could be never ending, as long as your person making the product decisions can pivot towards what the customer need is and effectively evolve the product in that direction. It may be that the product, an instantiation of the product solution may die, but the product does not die, because you can pivot away from that obsolete version to a better version. Let me see. What about clarifying roles? Discussing negative repercussions when the Scrum Master does not have the right access. It all seems counterproductive, non-collaborative, and siloed. Karen, did you want to say more about that? Not sure what that is. So I guess I could riff off of that a little bit. Oh, there's a new message. Oh, not able to unmute. Oh, Karen, let's see if we can fix that for you. I'm asking you to unmute through Zoom.
Yeah, Toby, I don't seem to have access to unmute people either. I don't know if you're able to.
I am pressing on it. Is it Karen, right?
Karen, right?
Karen, yeah.
Yeah, I'm asking to unmute, but she's unable to. I'm going to
Okay.
make her co-host for a quick second here.
Well, Karen, I'll riff off of that a little bit, and if you want to ask it, if I'm not hitting.
I made Karen a co-host temporarily. Karen, see, you might be able to unmute yourself.
Maybe you may be double muted, Karen.
It's showing that she's muted via Zoom. So anyway, let me just riff on that a little bit. So negative repercussions when the Scrum Master does not have the right access. So, well, part of it is the executives and others that the Scrum Master might want to talk to and doesn't have access to. They're going to be making decisions regardless of whether the Scrum Master is talking to them or not. The negative repercussion is that there may be information that the Scrum Master or others that the Scrum Master brings to that conversation. There may be information that is critical in order to make a better decision. So I think that's the negative repercussions there, are that the decisions are going to be made anyway, in spite of whether they have all the relevant information. So it could be that a decision is made that's suboptimal because they just don't have the full picture that could be provided to them by the Scrum Master. The riffing I want to do off of that is that even if the Scrum Master does have the right access, it doesn't mean that the individual that they're talking to is necessarily going to act in a way or decide in a way that we might hope that they would. They still have the authority. It's not the Scrum Master who has the authority ultimately to take action or make the decision. It's ultimately going to be that individual. So even with the right information, we can't be guaranteed that the individual will be making a decision that might be consistent with what we had hoped. All right. Well, so we have a bunch of things out there already. What customer personas are we talking about? How riffing on that one. Which customer personas are useful? You might create a whole bunch of personas, and some of them are useful and others are less so. Very good. Very good. Okay. Well, it is 8 minutes before we're all supposed to turn into pumpkins. So I just want to open it up for general Q&A. Toby, if that's okay.
Perfectly fine. Yeah, we encourage more questions.
Yeah, and if people want to come off mute or come on camera or whatever, I invite you to do that. So I'm going to bring up the chat window so I can see what people are asking. I'll put a couple other links there in the chat as we're winding down here as well. So this is a copy of the template in a PDF form. And I'm going to put a link out there for a blog post that addresses some of the topics from this evening, and a video. So
Jim, it's home here. I have a question, but it's really for that first model you drew
Yes.
before this canvas, before the mural was shared,
Mhm.
in the two loops, where the two loops seem to be separate, and I'm wondering if the second loop wouldn't be, going back to the process from the customer. So they're intersecting in a way. I don't know if that's even making any sense.
Oh, I think so.
In my mind anyways.
No, I think so. Okay, so let me bring that back. Let me bring that back and make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying. Okay, so
it's the one above this.
Yeah, it's this one.
Light bulb. Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
So in this one, in my mind, I'm thinking that from the customer, right? You may have a line that goes, if you draw it above that, it would go from the customer to the process.
Oh,
That
okay.
way you're getting feedback and
Oh,
you're
right.
pivoting the process, right? And
Mhm.
and creating the output that's slightly different every time you go through that circle.
Right. So yeah, got it. So this is something that I found there's a balance here that I found that can be really effective. So again, those of you who are familiar with the Scrum framework know that there's this this basic kind of, I won't even say it's ideal because I don't think it is actually ideal, but there's an expectation that the items that are brought into a sprint remain unchanged for the duration of the sprint, that they're protected from change. Now, for more mature teams, I don't think that's ideal because I want to take advantage of that learning that happens during the sprint. And the only way you're going to get that learning is by doing what you're describing, is that customer here has to be part of the team when we are in the process of building it, so that we don't have to wait all the way till the end of the sprint to get this this feedback. So if we're in process and this customer is part of our team helping us build what it is that they need, we can make adaptations during the sprint to get a better fit for the customer. Now, the reason Scrum says no change is because for less mature teams, that can become a very slippery slope where they start chasing something that is in constant movement, and they don't have an ability to like a heat-seeking missile. They don't have an ability to strike the target by the time the sprint is done. So more mature teams have learned how to do that in a way that they don't put at risk having the increments built during the sprint. So I'm right with you. I think that's an incredibly effective way, but it does take a lot of discipline and capability development within the team to be able to accomplish that effectively. So when I described this, I was kind of layering on top of it that Scrum process where we're doing a sprint and we're waiting all the way till the end. But obviously, this could be something where you could have input, process, output that happens within minutes, literally. And you could turn to that customer and say, "Hey, what do you think about that?" And they go, "Oh my gosh, the light's too bright." Now that would have been much better to discover on day 2 of the sprint.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you brought them in, with your low fidelity sort of wireframes, if you will, you will get feedback, right? And if there's one benefit that we have in this world of working remotely, is you can do that. You can bring your customer in. Don't wait till the end of the sprint. Bring them in throughout
The most
every
effective,
day.
the most effective agile teams I have had the privilege to work with have recognized that the customer is a member of their team, and they've brought them into that process. And when you can do that, when teams used to be co-located, even then it was a fiction, right? We all know that there were people who were remote, whether that meant they were down the hall or whether that meant they were across the globe. We've always had to deal with people who were remote. I think the pandemic has made us realize that that those people who weren't physically present in the same room were at a serious disadvantage, and we were also at a serious disadvantage because we didn't engage them in an effective way. So I think there's the fact that we all went remote gave us some empathy, and the tools and things that we started to use kind of brought us together into a virtual team space. So yeah, I agree with that as well. Some great advantages and some great opportunities for that. One of the big questions that I think is appropriate in terms of a process learning loop here is, now that people are going back into an office, we're still dealing with the truth that existed before, is that not everybody's in that same physical space. So how do we leverage the tools that we had and the processes that we created when we were almost all remote, how do we leverage those in an effective way when we get back into the office to support the individuals and interactions, right? I mean, the processes and tools are in support of that. So, I think we discovered some interesting ways to be more effective and engage those people that weren't necessarily engaged, at the times and places where they should have been before. So, that's like the example this evening is I'm sitting in my home meeting with you. How wonderful is that? I mean,
Yeah.
I love that. I didn't have to go anywhere. That's so cool. And I've been able to join meetups from around the world, without traveling or anything like that. So how do we learn how to do that in a more hybrid world? Yeah. And real time, I'm right with you on that. It's like real time. It's not waiting till the end of this, oh, we're going to invite you to a meeting every 2 weeks. It's like, no. How do we create an opportunity to kind of reach out and grab people, in the moment that we need them? Yeah. Great question.
Well, great questions and awesome presentation. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to learn from you, Jim, and it's great to have you as our first speaker for the year. We did have our share of slight technical glitches in the beginning, but I think we caught up and it was an amazing session. We learned a lot from you. A quick announcement. So for our February event, we are going to be featuring Dr. Uday Kamath. He is a guru in AI and ML, and he has published several leading books in that subject. And he's going to be talking to us about agile approaches to overcoming challenges in AI and machine learning projects. So that's going to be next month. The meetup event is already published, and we'll also have the LinkedIn event up tomorrow. So we look forward to having you register to that event and join us. And we want to thank everyone for joining us today. Jim, once again, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah. Thank you, Toby.
Yeah.
And the rest of the crew. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks everybody
all.
for joining.
Thanks.
Good evening.